there's been so much misinformation about Rasta, and as time goes on, Rasta gets fuzzier and fuzzier to the mainstream world. And they have all these misconceptions about Rasta. And yet there's this reverence for Rasta, but at the same time there's no commitment to the ancestral history and culture that has brought this country. So what I'm saying is that there's so much we need to come, if possible, and if you agree, we'd like to come back and invigorate people's respect and understanding of the culture.
Because the thing is, 5 years ago, 2015, the government is asking the question, who is Rastafari?
Oh my goodness.
And so now, again, reaching out to certain ones we have spoken with so many times before, especially dealing with a lot of the geopolitical issues that we have been seeing up until this point, and many ones showing a lot of concerns for France, their sphere of influence, and a lot of the things that have been said out in mass media and have been taken to heart by many ones that we hold near and dear, and kind of troubled us in a sense for ones to have their mental so wrapped up in a lot of, the bells and whistles, of mass media, and how a lot of stories can be spin and spun in a way to drive up the feelings in certain ones and take them away from actually looking at things more critically and, taking that aggregate of information and really assessing it in a sense in an overarching view. But I hear just to share a little bit more on France and let ones know exactly where we are in space and time and history and even in that sense giving some credibility to what we are seeing here in the present. Here from Al Jazeera, is France breaking with its colonial past in Africa? Subtitled, "It is the end of an era in West Africa as France moves to scrap the currency used by its former colonies." This dated here, May 23rd, 2020, an inside story by many of the writers and editors there at Al Jazeera. And again, reiterating a lot of our own sentiments we have shared with certain ones who have shared so much concern for France and their sphere of influence. We mentioned this, we'd have to say, about 6 to 8 months ago when the African Union was actually planning this and pushing the CFA Franc, or the French currency, the colonial currency that had spun throughout the 14 former colonies throughout Africa, and not to mention a lot of the former colonies throughout the world that also have been faced with this a big reshuffling of the world and what we are seeing here now. And again, this entire biohazard outbreak really has spun things up quite a bit here in the year 2020. But moving on to the reading here, just again to reiterate our points to certain ones, and hopefully they will take this to heart, do a little more research, and again assess where we are at this very moment. 8 West African countries will soon be using a new currency. The old one may not have been well known, but for 75 years, the CFA, as it is referred to in French, has been used as money from Senegal to Niger and most places in between. But now the French government has officially approved the end of the CFA franc. That means France will cease to co-manage the West African currency. The Bank of France will no longer hold half of the currency's reserves, and a replacement currency, the echo, will be introduced, but it will keep its exchange rate fixed to the euro. France renegotiated with its former colonies for 3 years before reaching the deal last year when we actually reported on this. But continuing on, but in this genuine change, is this genuine change or just a rebranding? the presenter, A1 Kamal Santamaria, and many other guests, adding in their 2 cents, A1 Marie Roger Beloa, a West African analyst and chief executive director of the African International Media Group, A1 Tony Schaefer, a professor of African and French Studies at the University of Portsmouth, and A1 Ken Ife, a macroeconomic policy analyst and consultant to the ECOWAS Commission. And again, adding this in and leaving this again here as another pinpoint for where France fits in to a lot of the greater scheme of things, especially dealing with the African continent, their own former colonies in and throughout the world, and also Western Europe and its positioning at this very moment here in 2020. We say so many times before, these geopolitical and socioeconomic tectonic plates have indeed clashed and shifted, creating such metaphorical earthquakes throughout the world, to where, again, we mentioned before, after we come fully out of this particular quarantine period and much of the world begins to push itself back, or at least push itself forward into this new normal, quote unquote, as ones have been mentioning so many times throughout media today and many other days, we will see a very different world than what we have become accustomed to. The CFA Franc, as the Al Jazeera report mentioned, had been in operation for at least 3/4 of a century, 75 years. So that really not only has stifled growth throughout West Africa and many other former French colonies, it has also, for the most part, done a complete bank run on a lot of many of its former colonies, and playing in a bit of a loan shark type of mentality to a lot of the countries who, of course, had been colonized by France in many times past. So again, this world has, already begun to change, but the outcomes, the effects, and things, are less seen on the forefront, of course, pending, all of the we can say the quarantining and a lot of the recoveries, do shape out as they are expected. So this world already has changed. Many of the wheels were already turning. We, of course, had, or at least thought we had done our best to alert ones of these things, and a lot of these issues that had been coming up and been happening here behind the scenes, and not so much put out there in the mass media, because clearly many ones didn't want information like this out there in the world, especially for many ones who were more so forward thinking as our audience itself, and utilize all of these pieces again to put together the puzzle of what we are seeing and what we may be experiencing or expecting to come out on the other side. So 2020, of course, though it has been a very trying time, it has been a very interesting time nonetheless, coming up into a lot of the issues that have come to the forefront, and those still to be rolled out throughout the second quarter and the beginning of the third quarter of this year, moving on into the summer. So again, leaving this out of the forefront again for ones to research for themselves, and also keep within their minds and their hearts, and also put within their information gathering system, and again, reassess, re-educate, and revitalize yourselves for this time that is to come. Again, I take all of the necessary precautions and keep yourselves safe, especially those around you whom you hold near and dear, because we are still in for quite a ride moving forward.
It's not about what I want. It's about what's fair! You thought we could be decent men in an indecent time!